Welcome to the first episode of the V'Heishiv Lev Podcast. I'm Tuvia Blau.
And I'm Hindy Herman.
And we are honored to be here with all of you, beginning a journey that started a few months ago.
Well, like 8 months ago, actually.
Just about 8 months ago. While I was learning in Israel, and you had come for a mission trip.
Yeah, I came on the Women's Chizuk mission in May, and we were learning at Esha Torah, where you were learning. And I reached out to you that I was here, and we met for the first time in person after about 5.5 years of working together on Zoom.
It's funny, with just a separation of about 100 miles and an internet connection, we kept a business relationship going that has really been special to me, and it's an honor to share this airspace with you. But I'd like to start and just introduce who we are and what we're doing and why we think this is such an important thing to do in supporting the families after so many years of working together. I remember sitting at Cafe Ramon in Mamila and talking about, our experiences over the last couple of years, 4 or 5 years, as you had mentioned. And I think we both stopped in our tracks and said, like, can you not believe how big this issue is? And at the time, we had been serving really the parents in the mix of estrangement and alienation. But I remember you had mentioned to me that there was a family that you had been working with where there was an adult child who had such a desire to reconnect with their parents. And in order to do so, we need to empower both the parent and the child with the same tools. And I think that's where our idea for creating this organization, V'Heishiv Lev, came from. Now, I'm pretty sure it was you who came up with the name V'Heishiv Lev. So
that was.
Where did that come from?
That's a good question. And I was working with an adult child, and it really created a spark in me to realize that there's more to this picture. There's, as you always say, multiple truths, and we have to be able to hear both the adult children and the parents, so that we can really work together to find a way for them to connect and to move forward. The name V'Heishiv Lev, I think it came when I was back in America, and we were discussing a great name for this. And a memory came to my head of this song that we always sang when we were kids, and that we sing on Pesach. And the song, Hinei Anochi Sholech Lachem Es Eliyahu Hanavi. And we all sang it, we all know it. But how many of us actually ever thought about that second pasuk in that song, V'Heishiv Lev Avos Ubanim? Practically no one, and nobody ever knew what it means. And when I ask people, they themselves tell me they never thought of it. Mm-hmm. And I think, as you said, this crisis of estrangement and parental alienation has exploded in the last few years, even since we've been working together. And people are now starting to connect something. Hey, what does that mean? And when we started to look into it, we learned that Hashem is telling us that in the days before Mashiach, He will be sending Eliyahu Hanavi to bring the hearts of the children back to the parents, and the parents back to the children. And that's very, very telling. Number one, it tells us that this is not something that was random. This is something that was created by Hashem. This was told to us in the Nevi'im. This is part of what is supposed to be happening in the days before Mashiach coming true. And
we must be close.
We must be very close. And just the same way as it's here, it will be resolved. And we can all do our parts to help bring Mashiach, to help the parents, help the children, work with both sides in a non-judgmental way to support each side, so that we can do our best to bring families together in a way that's comfortable and that works for each side, for both sides.
Yeah, it's so powerful. I've heard the story now a million times, but every time I hear you say it, it really puts me in a position to feel almost honored to do this work and to be part of the work that, as a shliach for these families, we know it's coming from Hashem. We know this challenge is put in front of each and every one of us by Hashem, and we know that He has a role in this, and that we need to do our work, our part. And I think that's why we always think about V'Heishiv Lev as the bridge, right? How can we give tools and resources to both the parent and to an adult child in a way that empowers them to feel good about who they are inside. So they begin to nurture the relationship on the outside. And I know that over the last couple of months in doing this work, that there are many different scenarios here at play. There are children who are cutting off contact to their parents.
Yes.
There are parents who are cutting off contact with their children.
Yes.
There are siblings that are taking sides or just finding an argument or a disagreement or not feeling heard or seen by them and making a choice to cut off contact with the ones that, spent their entire lives together. And
that could happen for different reasons as well. Sometimes there's a family dispute, and sometimes it starts with a separation from parents to children, and the children get involved and take sides. And sometimes it has nothing to do with the parents.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we're even seeing estrangement of children that are still living at home, which is a pretty new concept that we didn't discuss. We didn't really even consider years ago, but we're seeing more of that. As you said, I think we brought up an important point that we know this was meant to be, and this is something, an Isayon that Hashem wants us to go through now.
Yeah.
But to realize that all the reasons that we're going to discuss why we think these things are happening, and I'd like to hear from you what's going on in the world today that you think this might be happening, to realize that it is all orchestrated by Him for however He's setting this up for us.
Yeah. And not only that things can change.
Absolutely.
Very quickly.
Absolutely.
As we've all seen. And it's going to take patience and our eyes open to see these changes as they're happening. Things don't stay the same, and we can influence the way forward. We just have to feel good about where we're starting from and to know that that's not an end, that this is just the beginning of working through this challenge and finding a way to co-create relationships, right? Relationships are not one-sided. Historically, the term reconnection has been used. And so I always had a challenge with the word reconnection because it implies that I want to reconnect with you. And that's very one-sided. And so this idea of co-creating a relationship, one that works for mom and one that works for son, or for daughter and father, or mother and daughter, it has to work for each party so that everybody can feel like they're getting what they need out of the relationship and can feel good about being in the relationship. Moving forward.
I really appreciate what you're saying. And I think we're seeing a lot in social media, a lot of the adult parents expressing what they're going through. And then you see the adult children expressing what they're going through. And they're each expressing their own pain and their own perspectives. And really what you're talking about is to co-create something new that maybe the adult children might start to think about how they can connect with the parent in a way that is comfortable for them and that their parents could accept as well. And for the parent, not only to understand what their pain is going through, but to reach out to their children in a way that will be comfortable for the children as well.
Yeah. People always say, what does it take to reconnect or to co-create a relationship? And I think what you said hits the nail right on the head. It takes understanding. It takes understanding of how the other person in the relationship viewed what was going on at the time or what's going on now. It takes an understanding of what it feels like or what the other person may have experienced in that relationship, knowing that whatever it was for the child, for example, in that relationship is true for them. It doesn't mean that it needs to be true for you, the mother. It just means that you have to put yourself in a position where you can work towards understanding what that experience was like for that child. And I think that's a challenge. We all have egos. We all want to feel like our version of the story is right. But I think
and it is.
And it is. Absolutely. It's right for you. And I think if we can really help the people that we work with and the families that are going through this crisis, let's call it for what it is. Crisis. If we could help them to be curious, right? And open-minded, not that we're being pushed out or put on the defensive, but that this is just a way in which people can express what was it like for them, and what they potentially might need to move forward into a different type of relationship. It's interesting because I hear this a lot, and I know you do as well, especially when it's the parent who feels alienated or cut off from the child. The question is like, well, why should I even try?
Yeah.
And I think, and you would probably agree, that every child wants a relationship with their parent.
Every child longs for it somewhere inside their heart. I think that's true in the frum world, and I think that's true in the entire world.
Yeah.
I think that's the way we're created. And we've heard adult children expressing, well, how do I ever get past the pain if I'm disconnected? It doesn't go away.
Right.
The longing doesn't go away, and the pain doesn't go away. Even through the separation and the no contact, you're still hearing the pain very clearly coming through. So I agree with you.
Yeah. Every child wants a relationship with their parent, and every parent wants a relationship with their child. What they don't want, or what they might say, is that they don't want the relationship the way it exists right now.
Right.
Okay. And again, that becomes a starting point for growth, personal growth, and growth within the relationship. I think Hashem set it up that way. We're connected, right? We chose, each other.
And we were talking about parents saying, why should I? Well, that's a good question, but what is it that you really want?
Right.
And if you want something, how are you going to go get it?
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to talk a lot about pain, but let's dial it back. Something you said earlier caught my attention because I was recently looking online and I searched for this new hashtag called no contact. And what I found was staggering. I found that on just a few of the social media platforms that the hashtag no contact, which is really the buzz phrase of today, has over 650,000 posts attached to it.
Yeah.
And of those 650,000 posts of no contact, there are over 6 billion views. That is outrageous, and something is going on, and we need to work towards understanding what the problem is that got us here, and something that I think that not a lot of people are doing, which is something that I hope on this podcast we can start to explore and to explain, is what is the solution to this problem. The problem, by the way, is simple. It's a miss of communication, right? It's a difference in the way that one generation and another generation define specific terms, whether they be safety and boundary and healing and pain and toxicity and so many other of these sort of buzz phrases that we hear each and every day.
Yeah.
One of the things I enjoy doing is sending some of these videos back and forth to one another. And there's a certain emotion. I'm curious to see what you would think about this, but there's a certain emotion that both the parent and the child are speaking from when we hear what's going on social media. What emotion are you seeing?
I'm seeing a lot of anger.
Yeah.
From both sides.
Yeah.
Anger coming through a lot of pain. And that's what's so telling to me, because to so many, especially of the adult children, the term going no contact is their solution.
Right.
And if I understand the need sometimes to have space and to pull back, but if that's the solution, why are we still hearing so much anger, and why are we feeling so much anger? What is going on here? Something is not adding up to me.
Yeah.
A solution should be putting you in a place that you're feeling whole and good and strong and coming across in a way of feeling content. But I'm even hearing the adult children talk about the pain and the anger. So I'm wondering if that's something that in the interim is what's working for them, or is that something that they really feel is a solution? I don't believe it's a solution for a long term, because as you said, I believe that every parent longs for their children and every child longs for some kind of connection to a parent, even if it seems impossible.
Why anger, though? What's driving that emotion, do you think?
I think that what's driving the anger is that two different things, actually. It starts with not understanding at all, not looking to understand. When we're looking at ourselves and we're not looking what might be going on outside, we might be coming from a place of judgment, right? Not trying to understand what might be going on with somebody else. We're missing a lot of information, and that leads us to thinking about where we're feeling, which is anger. If we can try to really take a step back and understand what might be going on, what might I be missing, what might I not be seeing, we might make some space for, like you said, curiosity, which might even lead to compassion. If we can understand what somebody actually went through or how they feel, or that they might be even limited. Sometimes we're looking at people that might be very limited and don't have the ability to be the parents that we need. But if we could see them in a way of understanding their limitation, we might take a step back from feeling that anger and open that door for compassion, understanding. It says the Yom Kippur davening. What are we davening for Hashem to do for us? There's no room in one head for anger and compassion. It doesn't exist. When we feel anger, we're angry. If we can conquer the anger so that we can make space for the compassion, we might try to see things in a different way. And that might lead to my next point of actual forgiveness, which we don't talk about often. But in order to be able to forgive, I think there needs to be a step of really finding that compassion with understanding.
Yeah. I was looking at this week's Parsha that just passed over Shabbos. I was reading the Chumash by Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, and I was stopped almost dead in my tracks when I read about what he described was one of the greatest lessons in psychotherapy. And as I read further, it spoke about the idea of forgiveness. And the question was posed, like, how is it that Yosef was able to forgive? His brothers estranged him. This is the estrangement parsha.
They threw him in a
pit. 22 years of disconnection from the family. And yet here we are with this level of forgiveness and acceptance. And the following pasuk said, that Yosef said, the reason why I was able to forgive was because I realized that it was never you, my brothers, who threw me into the pit, but Hashem, but God. And I found that to literally just make all of this make so much sense, because you're right. If we're leading with anger, that perpetuates fear and frustration. I get almost like somebody who isn't able to communicate, and you start to like almost pound your fist, like I'm not getting my point across, and I'm getting upset and I'm angry over this. But if I could pull back for a second and say, wait a second, this is from Hashem. Yeah. This challenge is for me to grow and to build and strengthen my connection with Hashem and with my family. And if we can see that, if we can lead with this opportunity to forgive because Hashem's in charge, I think that can lessen the anger, right? And pull people back from such deep emotion, not as an endpoint, right? It's not forgive and forget, right? It's forgive so that you could begin to more effectively communicate with the other person, knowing that, they came to this with a limited understanding, potentially limited knowledge. One of the things I see on social media is, my parent didn't give me the upbringing that I needed or that I deserved.
I see that too.
And by the way, I think most parents, if not all parents, do the absolute best job. As a father to a 12-year-old, I understand that we all make mistakes, and there's no excuses here. This is not about blame. It's not about pointing the finger, but we all do the best that we absolutely can. And I know in our work, we always explain that forgiveness is the thought process that if I'm forgiving you, for example, that I think, you did the best that you could with the information that you had. Had you known how to potentially, validate me more or to hear, what I mean by what I say, had you had the ability to go inside and try to understand your own emotions and to support, fine. things may have been different, but forgiveness is a starting point and an understanding that people always lead in the way that they act based upon what they know, right? Or the learned behaviors that they've observed throughout their own relationships, and the lens of emotion that they're seeing those experiences through.
You're right. I agree. I think what you're saying about not forgetting also very important, because the way the relationship wasn't working.
Right.
So we're not looking to forget. We're looking to build something new based upon what we learned from the past and to move forward. So forgiveness is really about moving forward. And I think it's very interesting that you're bringing up the Parsha, because look at Yaakov, right? He heard that Yosef is alive after all these years. And his first reaction was he saw Yosef and they hugged. And we read in the Chumash that those years that Yaakov lived in Mitzrayim with Yosef and all his children and his grandchildren, they lived in Goshen, were the happiest of his life, because he wasn't angry either. He moved forward, and Yaakov had a very hard life, but those last years were his best. And I don't even know if he needed to forgive because he was on such a high level.
Yeah.
But we don't hear about any anger to his children for what they did.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So how do we get here, right? Because I think about our work, and every day we're seeing emails and phone calls and messages. They're SOSs. They're please help. I have tried and I have done everything that I could possibly think of, and nothing's working. Before we try to figure out how to solve this problem, how do you think we got here? And not only that, but you've said this many times, that the frum community, the religious community, is very different than the secular community.
Yes.
And I'm sure, knowing you, that you'll share a little bit, right? Thank you. I'm sure you'll share a little bit of how you see that. But what is going on that families are struggling with something that is so foundational in the religious communities, which is family? How do we get here?
I wonder that myself many times, and I think there's not one answer here. There's many answers. Number one is, unfortunately, this is going on in the secular world.
Yeah.
To, as you said, an exploding amount of families. And unfortunately, what goes on in the outside world affects us.
Yes,
more than we like to know. It infiltrates more than we like to know. We are, number one, we are not as separate as we would like to think we are. We are all on social media. We're all reading the post. We're all hearing the terms going no contact. It's become an acceptable thing to do. It's become a solution of healing, unfortunately. And again, as I said, what's there comes here, maybe a little less, but it's seeping through. Social media is a big problem. I think also the traditional roles of parents, the way we grew up in Europe, our grandparents in Europe, my parents, it was very different. And again, because we're affected by the outside world, right? A generation ago, a parent's role was just accepted by the kids. I am of that generation. Our parents didn't know how to validate.
I used to hear that a lot. Yeah, I'm the father. That's why.
Because I said so. Because I said so. And to be really honest, when my grandparents or my great aunt, I remember her telling me things about the way life was in Europe, and we should appreciate everything we have in America, I would look at her and think like, you're old. What do you know? That's the old country. And in that same understanding, our kids are looking at us like that. Like, you don't get it, Ma. This is not the world today. It's not because you said so.
Yeah.
It's not working. I'm not questioning if that's right or it's not right. It's just a breakdown of the role of parents and children today. It's a change. It's just different. We'd say that every generation that's further from Har Sinai is a little different, and the same way that my parents say kids today, I remember them saying kids today, right? We're saying kids today, but it's unfortunately to a level that's really become much more affected, and there is a breakdown. parents, again, also, kids are not living near parents today. When we were young, all our cousins lived in Flatbush. Everyone lived near each other. And there's something about physical connection that keeps families close.
Yeah.
Today, cousins don't know each other as much. They're all over the world. And we are a much greater amount of people. Families have grown exponentially. It's even just hard to connect with your immediate family, and you become more distant.
Yeah.
And I think it's just another reason that things have just become a little more okay and acceptable. We need to.
Are you saying that physical distance also might create emotional distance?
I think so.
It's interesting.
I think so. I see a difference to the way the next generation, they love their cousins, they're close, but they're not as likely to show up for them because they can't. Yeah. They're busy, they have big families, and it leads to a little bit of a disconnect in families in general. There is, in the secular world, there is that idea of individualism, which is another concept that is another therapized word.
Yeah.
And it's another overused word, and I don't like to use it. But the fact of the matter is that therapy has changed the world today, and as much as we like to.
And the access to therapy, not just in the traditional setting, but online. And by the way, even people who are not seeking a therapist are in some way hearing, therapy speak and therapy approaches.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to access resources of inner family work or inner child healing on the internet, not necessarily having a full depth and understanding, although I'm sure people are finding what they need, but they're finding, I'm concerned at times, what they need based upon trying to prove, their experience to be one that's valid for them. And we could probably spend an entire podcast talking about where we think therapists potentially have gone wrong. Maybe it's because some therapists have gone wrong. Thank you for the correction. Not all therapists, but in some ways, I think when somebody fails to get something within a relationship, what do? They go and search for it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I think one of the disconnects between, parent and child today is that children have a desire to have sort of this instant gratification, to feel validated and to be seen and heard, because that's what this generation is about. It's the Amazon generation. We needed something this morning. It's here by 2:00, right? I heard a podcast by Mel Robbins, which I think was spectacular, talking about change. And they spoke about if this generation doesn't get the instant gratification, it's very unlikely that the change will continue to take place, right? Because they need it and they have to have it now.
And it's not just the children, it's the adults too are affected by that too. I think that I've changed because my Amazon packages are coming right away as well. I think we have all become conditioned to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to get their needs met, look, the message today, and again, there's no pointing fingers here. I think we're just trying to lay out that there is an issue and potentially understand where that issue comes from. As Blau now for 6 years and getting into my religious world through doing this work, seeing really dysfunction within the system, I seldomly ask myself, what is it within the community, within the system, that may have gone wrong?
Well, I'd like to ask you a question. What are you seeing in the world outside of the frum community, where you're coming from? I would really like to hear. What are you seeing? And when you're coming into this community, how are you viewing this?
Yeah. No, I think one of the biggest and stark differences between sort of outside and inside is the message. The message outside of the community is be your own person, chart your own course, right? You are who you are, and don't let anybody tell you anything differently. And like you said earlier, that message has really begun to seep in, even just 6-7 years ago, as I began to get interested in Yiddishkeit and began to understand really what that path looked like for me. I used to really think to myself, wow, there's an education system in place and there's a regimen in which is followed. And part of that education system is contained within the system. And therefore, people with flip phones and no access to the internet isn't really the case today. Somehow, some way, there's this open access to the secular world and to the messages. So one, to answer your question, is I think this onus on be your own person. Whereas within the community, it's always been, this is the way we do it. Now, of course, there is space for individuality and uniqueness and personality, of course, but we're all sort of moving in that same direction. So that's one. Two, I think inside the system has done an incredible job. And I just, had the amazing schus of learning at Eshet Torah after, several years of becoming frum and learning outside to go into the yeshiva and to really see it firsthand for what's going on. And there's a process of learning halacha and learning Torah and understanding commentary and musar and learning how to live a Jewish life. But what I haven't yet seen in all these years and in every different, way I've tried to get involved is where's the onus on emotional awareness? And also emotional vulnerability, not only identifying how do I feel, but knowing with the right tools and ability to express how I feel to somebody else. Because we sort of lack those tools, not just in the frum communities, but as a culture, as a society, we lack the tools. And so I'm not comparing anybody specifically, but a 2-year-old who's throwing a temper tantrum, right? Kicking and banging and yelling and screaming. It's because they don't have the right way in which to communicate. And I think that then becomes the ikar, is a breakdown in communication between two parties. One where one party feels like they're giving more to the relationship than they might be receiving back from it. And when those things happen and there's a miss in an understanding of what terminology is, I always laugh when I first spoke with a woman that I was working with many years ago. And she says, what's this thing with the boundaries? I said, well, what do you mean by that? She says, we were 10 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment in Muncie. We don't have no boundaries. And so, part of the work that we're doing today is empowering people to understand what maybe the newer generation means by boundaries and helping that, the younger generation, I should say, understand, how mom and dad might perceive what a boundary is. And trying to create a continuity and consistency and a common language so that there's not a miss in communication. And, once there is, it's very hard to sort of put the trains back on the track once they've gone off. Right. So that's just the beginning of it.
I think maybe I'm hearing that in the frum community, there is a bigger miscommunication between the parents and the children based on the way that we were raised. And is that different than in the outside world? You're thinking
not only that, but I remember working with somebody who spoke mainly Yiddish.
Yeah.
And for what we have in English for all the different, emotions is very limited when you start to translate. And with many people living overseas and in Israel and all the different, cultures that are sort of now being merged and blended together with, kids that were raised in the States, kids who have the verbiage of going through the school systems and of the, outside world that infiltrates. There's a disconnect. And that disconnect, look, put away the emotions, put away, perspective and put away the limited ability for people to understand and to be curious and just get down to the actual brass tacks of the language. It's a miss.
It is a miss.
And these are, I think, the fundamental, before we get into who's to blame and who's at fault, which is not something that we do, right? We're working towards building a bridge between two people, one that feels safe, which maybe we should start there. We should talk about the word safe. I think it's one of the most overly used words, therapized words, and one that causes a lot of triggering of the other party. How would you define safe?
The way I define safe is to be in a space where I feel comfortable to speak my mind without somebody putting me down or jumping down my throat or making me feel sorry that I said it.
Yeah.
If I'm going to feel sorry that I said it, then I'm not safe. That's how I would define it.
Okay. So you would say, I guess you would agree then that it's really about emotional safety.
Well, right? That's what we're talking about. I don't think that there is an element of people who are talking about feeling safe who are coming from physically abusive homes. Not to diminish that. But for the most part, I think the word safe today is being used as an emotional guard.
Okay.
Absolutely.
No, it's interesting because I think that we have to make that distinguishing factor here that there is our work is about bringing families back together, right? Our tagline, right, where hearts return and families heal, right? That's individually and collectively as one. That's the mission. That doesn't mean that we're here to force anybody into something that they're not ready for.
Right. Absolutely not.
Right.
Of course not.
And to also pull back and to make sure that, where we say, put your own mask on first before you can put the mask on of somebody else, to make sure that you feel strong and stable and to empower people with the right ability and tools to do so. But the safety that we're speaking about here is truly emotional safety, right?
Yeah.
If there's a physical abuse, then I think those are one-off scenarios that we're not really getting into today. I love what you said about not feeling safe, being put on the defensive, right? I think when somebody feels like they're going to be shut down, right? Or somebody's going to take what somebody else said and then use their version of it, shutting out your version is the opposite of safety. And I think about, well, how does safety get created, right? And safety is when you know what to expect. Something we hear a lot is, one time I speak to mom and she's upset with me, and the next she's a loving mother that she's always been.
Right.
How do I know what to expect? And that doesn't feel safe. And on the other side, we hear from many parents who say, yeah, well, and this sort of walking on eggshells.
They're
scared. And we understand, and I'm not trying to minimize or make fun in any way, but that walking on eggshells shows a lack of confidence.
Yeah.
And when you're sort of topsy-turvy and not feeling good and strong and empowered, it doesn't make somebody else want to come close to that. Right.
No.
And again, we're going to talk about through our podcast, God willing, that we can share people how to become more confident, how to reduce and overcome fear that's holding people back from saying and doing the things that need to be said and done. How do you create boundaries? How do you structure a boundary that is really something that helps to create safety for yourself and safety for others? How do we validate each other? How do we feel heard? And how do we work towards really actively listening and hearing somebody else? This is really what I'm excited to get into with you over the next couple of podcasts and beyond that. And hopefully with Hashem's help, we'll have some additional guests who might be able to add even greater perspective.
That would be amazing. You brought up what emotions I'm seeing when I'm looking at the parents, I'm looking at the kids. And there is one more emotion that I want to bring up on both sides. Loneliness. I'm seeing loneliness from both sides. Both sides are in pain. And as again, Hashem created the human beings to have relationships, to connect. We're people that are meant to be with others, with our families, with our friends. And when that breaks down, we're all lonely. Nobody is leaving this or escaping that feeling, even especially when they're going no contact. We hear of people talking about, in the not Jewish world, of connecting with their animals.
Right.
Now, that sounds kind of lonely to me. I mean, it's nice because animals don't answer you back, so you could feel very safe with them, we're very nice. But on the other hand, it's not really very fulfilling, and it's not what we were created to be. Remembering that Hashem put us into this nisayon. We're meant to be here in the days before Mashiach. I can't say I know why, and I don't think anyone knows why, but we can say that we're supposed to do something with it. He wants us to grow from this and learn from this and become better from this. And each person to really ask ourselves, what might I be doing that I'm supposed to be doing to fulfill this nisayon that he put me in? And I think it's a lot more than just shutting down. Yeah. And I'm not saying shutting down is not something that we need to do at certain points, right? But ultimately, why was I put here? For what reason? Rather than just why, but for what reason?
Right. Anger is not bad, and neither is loneliness or any emotion. And I want to be clear about that, because what's fascinating is I see emotions as alarm bells and as signals. Especially, I think Hashem gave us anger for that purpose. Something's not right. But I don't think the solution is cutting off contact. I think the solution may be creating a little bit of space. And that's okay. Especially if you communicate it and there is an end to that space.
Another therapy word, there's space.
It's fascinating because I hear from a lot of the adult children, I need space. Mm-hmm. And then the parents are saying, well, see, space means distance. Well, space might mean distance, but again, another missing communication here is that space also might be runway, right? So that they can land the plane or feel like they have the ability to use their voice and have that space to fill. And the ability for, I think, one person in a relationship to create that space and be okay with what's now coming from the other side to fill that space and to not push it down or push it aside or invalidate it or say that it's right or wrong, but to just be there with it without trying to solve, change, or fix it, but just to accept it for what it is now is the basis for creating a strong foundation in which you can begin to rebuild from there.
Right. So like the word boundaries, really, safe, you can see it as distance. I don't want you in my life. Or you can see it as, like you always like to say, a keli, right? A vessel.
Right.
To create, to put something new into that space.
Yeah, I think about space. I think about the highway that I drove on to get out here to Brooklyn today. Mm-hmm. And, when we think about this idea of boundaries, which I'm sure we're going to spend many, many sessions or podcasts talking about, when there's a boundary on one side and a boundary on the other side, right? It does nothing more than create safety for me to travel freely within that space that's been created for the purpose of me being able to feel good and comfortable, confident in where I am in my lane and beginning to observe what's going around. I think about this all the time. I'm not reacting to everything that's coming. Can you imagine if I reacted to every car that was coming at me? I would get a workout. I would have never gotten here, right? And by the way, that would have perpetuated so much fear in me. I would have probably shut down and been frozen in time and not
felt safe.
No, to get here. And so the ability, and this is key as we begin to maybe wrap up here, is that I would say the majority of this work is mindset. Right? It's the way that you begin to see things and the potential in what these things that you see are create these opportunities for growth in so many different avenues. And I think that's key. And it should almost be maybe this isn't the right phrasing, but I'm going out on a limb here. It's almost exciting, right? One of the compliments, I'll say it to everybody here, one of the compliments you gave me couple of weeks ago was one of the many.
Okay.
One of the compliments you gave me was that you appreciated how I was able to take feedback. It was one of the many conversations of probably something that I was doing wrong, and you were bringing it to my attention, and I greatly appreciate that because I've retrained my mind. It doesn't make me perfect. It makes me on the journey with everybody else. I promise you that. But it does, I've trained my mind to say, you know what, when somebody starts to tell me their version or how they see it, rather than me to react to it, to get defensive and to shut down, I say, tell me more. Help me to understand. I mean, if I wake up in the morning and I daven and I ask Hashem, please give me clarity in relationships and please help me to grow. That's all I'm ever trying to do is grow. And then here you are telling me how I should be different. Then I have to see it as an opportunity. And I think if two people in relationship can see those opportunities and again, I'll say it, to be excited, like, wow, that's how you see it? What was that like for you?
Wow.
And what did you need from me at the time? And by the way, if and at any point you were to take the next step, not just reconnect, but just take the next step forward, what would you need from me? And how would you know you got it? Those types of curiosity questions can make all the difference in relationship. And just because somebody says what they need, we talked about this earlier too, doesn't mean you have to give it to them.
Right. That's where the boundaries come in and people get very confused. They feel very stuck. 100%. Listening and hearing and understanding doesn't necessarily mean I have to do it that way. But as you said, mindset, It's the beginning, it's the middle,
and the end.
And it's just all the way through, because all the tools and all whatever you say, and if the mindset isn't in the right place, it just doesn't carry over.
Yeah. And look, mindset is skewed by emotion.
Well, yeah.
Right? I can look at the same exact situation through the lens of anger, and I promise you it will be a negative experience.
And you will see anger.
And I'll continue to attract other things that create more anger within me.
Absolutely.
If I can shift because I'm present, mindful in the moment, and not thinking about what was or what will be so far off into the past or the future, which causes stress and anxiety in the body. We shut down. We didn't even talk about our favorite topic, fight or flight, tonight. Right. We'll get there.
Many opportunities.
But, we have the essence to say, wait a second, if I can shift the way that I'm thinking about this, which shifts then the way that my heart is responding to it. And I look at it through a lens of hopefulness and a lens of joy and gratitude for so many people, especially as we move through the Chagim, who are experiencing this level of pain, loneliness, despair, disconnection, right, from their families during these tough holiday seasons where they're designed to be with family, and here I am without my kids, without my grandkids. And even on the adult children's side, we say, you know what? Yes, I may have chosen to cut off contact because that's the healthiest thing for me right now. Or maybe until I find the right way to express myself, or until, mom and I come to a mutual understanding and acceptance of what our truths are, until then, this is best. I promise you they still long for their families. And so there's pain on both sides.
Agree. You know what you said about mindsets. This might be a new therapy concept to some, but this is really nothing new. And this is brought down to us in the Torah. And we learned from the teachings of Rav Avigdor Miller. Zatzal spoke about this concept all the time. And I learned it from his daughter, Rebbetzin Brag. She would talk about looking at the rain and waking up to see a rainy day, and how dark it is outside, and how it could put you in despair, and that's what you're thinking. Or you can shift your mindset and see the beauty of the rain and what the rain does, and be so thankful for your home and your rooftop. And as Rav Avigdor Miller would appreciate the air on a hot day by sticking his head in a sink full of water and immersing in there until he couldn't breathe anymore, and he would lift his head up until he was almost
to appreciate the hot air.
Thank you, Hashem, for the beautiful air that you give us on a hot, humid day in July. And these are his teachings. And you taught me these things, and you didn't even know about Rav Avigdor Miller. So I think that's
incredible. It was inside somewhere. It just had to be brought out through.
There you go. You always had the spark, you see?
We all have sparks, and I think let's start to end there, because I think that we have to begin to see the good in this opportunity to shift and to change, and collectively we need everybody on board. We need everybody to support our community. This shouldn't be a taboo topic. It should be one where we are leading with a level of non-judgmentalness towards one another. We should not be asking a parent of an estranged child, well, what did you do wrong? We should try to help them. What do you need to feel supported so that you don't feel so alone? We should be reaching out across the lines, not telling people you need to this and you need to that, but trying to meet them where they are with positivity and love and care. We are one. Klal Yisrael out. We need to work together, which is something very different than the outside secular world is doing today.
I think also you're bringing up such an important point. In the outside secular world, there's a feeling of cheering for the adult children that disconnected. And in the frum world, there's a feeling of shame or blame. And I want to say that this is not about any of that. We are reaching out with compassion to both sides. There's no blame here. There's a lot of pain and a lot of loneliness and a lot of anger. But as you said, we're Klal Yisrael, and we do have the ability to rise above. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. And you are not alone, not the children, not the parents, nobody. Your pain is real. Both sides are going through tremendous pain, and you are all in a place that we feel that we are one people. And let's end with that.
Yeah. Just to add one last closing thought, because, well, maybe I need the last word.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
We have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity to make a significant change. And I think that change must start with ourselves, right? If everybody can stand up and say, you know what? Maybe I feel wronged, but I'm going to start with me. How can I use this to take the next best step? How can I, work on myself? Not at the deficit of pushing others away so that you can do that work, but how can I start here? Start within, connect to Hashem, and to ask for help, right? And then seek resources. Like, I pray every day that we're able to give to all the families that we're honored and blessed to work with the tools and techniques to learn a different way to speak, a different way to understand, and a different way to approach in mindset and in actions that will create the shift that we desire.
Love the way you said that. Amazing.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to continue this journey with you.
Really enjoyed
and
this.
We'll look forward to seeing everybody real soon.